Island of Illusion Part 1, I think was one of the first episodes that I can think of where it must have been shot on location. The Island of Illusion definitely reminds me a little bit of either Balboa Park or the San Diego Zoo. Because I can't think of anywhere that I've seen, I guess maybe the Arboretum a little bit, but uh, yeah, I'm going to be thinking about the Island of Illusion for a little while, and the fact that it's one of the only dimensions that Zordon doesn't know about and can't reach. I actually think I was going to do both parts together because it was just a two-parter, but there's so much happening in the first part that is both good and bad um, that it makes sense to make a two-parter video, I think. I think Island of Illusion is the first Power Ranger episode that feels like a Sentai episode. I can see Zuri Anger going through this. With actually some of the expressions that they would use. Just it feels like a Sentai episode. Locust, the kind of mischievous wind demigod. I thought I was going to get a Loki character, but Locust is actually their own kind of like evil wind presence. I also like Rita's Moon Palettes. When it's got more of the occult, like she's a much more interesting leader in character when she does more occult stuff. I will say there is a little bit of confusion for me as the viewer as to when the Island of Illusion is going to take place. An earlier episode, I can see her just sending them to the Island of Illusion and not bothering with the escalation of the battle. Here, she waits until Toxic Foam has stilled the Zords, the Megazord, before she sends them. Like without it, it's essentially a 10-minute episode. But knowing it's coming, it sort of feels like um it sort of feels like an escalation of tactics, but it misses it a little bit because we don't know enough about Locust. I guess you can infer from the three or four other times we've seen her do spell work that it's probably bad, and the way the characters interact. This is the first time where Tommy has not morphed with the rest of the group that felt successful. Failed to had a reason to stay behind. I'm still a little lukewarm on Tommy, but he's growing on me. The issue is that everything that Jason is known for, Tommy is now doing. So the only time Jason is now making an impact is when he's morphed and in charge of the Megazord, seemingly. It's hard to tell. It feels like they all kind of are in charge at the same time, but he talks more when morphed. Um, Bulk and Skull are in the beginning of the episode. They're fine. I kind of want to know why they have pillars in the corner of the juice bar. It can't just be for Bulk and Skull to pinball into. Um, the Island of Illusion episode is an episode about confidence, and it reminds me of episodes 3 and 4, which are both about teamwork. And this just happens to be about confidence in a way where they're not being subtle about it. I do like this is a Zack-centric episode. I do like some of the themes of how Zack responds to challenge and kind of, I don't want to say giving up, but of getting like really hyper aware of his fear or disappointment, disappointing others. It is, again, it feels like Happy Birthday, Zach. It feels like another version of that in a good way. Um, yeah, I didn't like the toxic foam. I didn't like Mutitis having the same weapon as the Frankenstein monster. Mutitis feels a little toxic adventure-y. I can't imagine that was an American creation. It seems a little too gooey to be American. It must have been a Sentai fight. It's not very good. I actually did appreciate the Island of Illusion choosing monsters they'd already faced that seemed kind of scaled to each of them. There was the tortoise with the stoplight, there's Eye Guy, there's Pudgy Pig, a couple other ones. They all seemed sort of tailored to one of each of the classic five. Tommy doesn't have one, which is interesting. They each do an interesting pose too, which I think are actually the poses they end up um, using for some of the smaller game pieces later on for things, for either the Power Ranger board game or just for little figures you can buy. Um, so it's interesting to see how they individually respond to the Island of Illusion. It's also interesting because I don't know if I like the fact they become so dependent on being able to morph that when they don't have it, it feels like an emergency from their end. but as a viewer, I've seen them face more with less resources. So I have to think about whether I like their reaction. It could be that the Island of Illusion automatically heightens fear. So, like, as a tabletop gamer, I could have my players roll to see how much the fear hits them, because that is a mechanic in the game, is like this idea of willpower. It's part of smarts, not social, interestingly enough, but it's part of the smarts category, essentially, is willpower. So, or yeah, one of them is willpower, one of them is cleverness. But it's a smart thing. It's not a social thing in my mind. I don't play fear-based stuff as social based, which I maybe I should. Um, yeah. I liked Island Evolution Part 1 because I'm a big fan of Sentai. If you don't like Sentai and quick cuts make you nauseous, you might not like it. The clarity in the narrative is a little hard, and it sort of feels like I should be marking it lower than I'm going to mark it. I don't think it's top five. Maybe the second part is so good it'll bring part one up, because I think these two very much interlink together. The cliffhanger with Zack disappearing because he's lost his confidence in himself works for the genre. Um, I think it works for the episode too. It's a little heavy-handed. When they have the Rangers do that performative fear where they're doing it for the tween and younger crowd, which I was when this premiered, um, I can see it being more impactful for them. As an adult, it's slightly less so. It's like when you watch Dawson's Creek 20 years after and you're like, wow, those being very melodramatic, sort of thing. But that's the show. Yeah. Yeah, Island of Illusion Part 1, it's an interesting episode to watch because I like it, but there are things about it I almost immediately want to fix. Also, I remember there was the little guy Quagmire in it, but I sort of thought Quagmire, the actor for Quagmire, was also the guy from Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and he's not. Um, the more I think about Quagmire, the more I think about Keeper from Super Dino Charge. And so I wonder if that came up and like the people that wrote Super Dino Charge and Dino Charge were aware of characters like Quagmire that just seemed to hang out in these little zones. I think he's trapped there or he's a guide. I want to say he's probably a guide. That's what I recall. He's got a very Mystic Knights of Tir Robin Hood thing going on. Shout out to Mystic Knights of Tir by the way. Um, yeah. This is a short review because I think it's one of those things where if you love Sentai, this episode really works. In theory, this episode should be rated really highly, but there are just some things that Americanizing Sentai specifically, because this feels like an Americanized Sentai episode, not necessarily a Power Rangers episode. Um, it'll be top 10, I think, but I can't imagine it in top five because we have some really great top five. It does have shades of high five in it, but I don't think it's as good as Power Ranger Punks. I still think Power Ranger Punks has some really great character development that Island of Illusion Part 2 probably has, but then I don't really see, like, it's so hard for me to have this episode about confidence be here because fear and confidence are not the two sides of the same coin for me. Like, courage and bravery, maybe. Like there's a different version of this episode where it's about courage, and they drop the Zack subplot, um, but it still works. But I don't want them to drop the Zack subplot because he doesn't get enough to do. Um, I do love hearing Trini talk. She sounds very natural in this episode, which I'm really excited by to hear her talking as herself. It's also exciting to kind of see how they have adapted the stylization so all six Rangers feel different in their kind of street clothes unmorphed, but you still know which Ranger they are, and they're all a little different, but they all have variations on the theme. This episode also goes really, really hard on the music. There's like 20 different mini scores happening throughout the episode in like 20 different genres. And that only barely includes the morphed fight scenes. Scorpina gets a line or two, which is kind of neat. They've really I'm really hoping Scorpina gets a bigger episode. Because I remember Scorpina being kind of a threat when I was a kid, and maybe I don't. Um, yeah, Island of Illusion. I think it might be in Balboa Park or maybe the San Diego Zoo. Also, Zack needs to pick a struggle because he can't be afraid of snakes and all bugs. Um, Also, he's the only ranger that is fully affected by fear this early because it's obviously like his episode to win or lose. But the other rangers are freaked out. I feel like it's an overreaction, like especially on Tommy and Jason's part. On Tommy's part, not so much because he's more like worried that he can't contact Zordon, but I feel like it's an overreaction from Jason and Trini and maybe Kim. Billy, they go back and forth on whether he's actually good at martial arts so often that I can imagine, but he actually seems most stoic and prepared for this. Like he almost right away gets on the nose why they're why they are there. Which I like is foreshadowing actually to the fact that he is going to help build the White Tiger chute is the implication of it. Or he's at least going to watch it being built from afar. And there's a lot of ways in which Billy feels like the most important ranger in the universe to the point where they have Trini acting as translator for him, which says a lot about her mental capacity. But like, it's a little better than it used to be because in the first few episodes where he was like spitting jargon like he's Spock, no one could really understand what he was saying. It's a little better. They've tempered it a little bit. I think we're getting into like season one really finding its stride. But I cannot imagine how exhausted the actors playing the Rangers are. Yeah, Island of Illusion. If you like Sentai, I think you're going to really like it. I really like Locus as a concept. And I'm curious to see how they wrap this up because you can't have something that bad hanging out somewhere in the universe afterward. It can't just go away. I feel like there has to be a resolution in part two. This feels like it would justify having three parts. Because I feel like getting off the island and getting your Zord back together, you could do getting off the island as one whole episode, and then you could do a third part of it. Um, it is interesting. It's an interesting concept. I like the island evolution. I'm just distracted by like how very much it feels like San Diego. I'm about to say. But that's all I got for you today. As Zordon likes to say when he knows where everybody's going, may the power protect you. We'll see you for Island of Illusions, Part 2.